There we go. We'll get us going there. Welcome everybody to the Governor's Task Force on Broadband Access. Today is Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. I would just like to remind everyone that this is a public meeting and that is being recorded. A meeting agenda is available on the Public Service Commission's event calendar and also on the task force webpage. Also, in an effort to maintain audio quality, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. I also ask that any members of the public be mindful of their audio and remain muted throughout the duration of the meeting, other than during the public comment period. I'll go ahead and do roll call for those that are members of Governor's Task Force on Broadband Access. Bob Abrams.
I am present.
Thank you. Biko Baker. Kwame Barnes. Marta Bechtel.
Here.
Thanks, Marta. Brittany Beyer.
Here.
Thanks, Brittany. Sal Carranza let me know he would not be able to attend. Lori Collins.
Here.
Thanks, Lori. Angie Dickinson.
Here.
Thanks, Angie. Emily Dittmar.
Here.
Thanks, Emily. Russ Falkenberg.
Here, Mark.
Thanks, Russ. Chris Hershong.
Here, Mark.
Thanks, Chris. Gail Hike.
Here.
Thanks, Gail. Barbara Koldos.
I'm here.
Hi, Barbara. Thanks. Chris Meyer.
Here.
Thanks, Chris. State Senator Mark Liner, staff. Jose Martinez. State Representative Mercer, staff. State Senator Ratcliffe for staff. State Senator Paffer, staff. Mike Rave.
Present.
Thanks, Mike. Rachel Shemlin.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Rachel. Thanks. Steve Schneider.
Here.
Thank you, Steve. Michelle Schuler. Brett Schupner.
Here.
Thanks, Brett. Chet Streeb. State Representative Udell. Oh, he let me know he would not be able to attend today. They're in session. And then Chad Young.
Here.
Thanks, Chad. I do not believe I missed anybody, but if I did, because you're in the Teams meeting, could you please let me know now?
Josh Shell is here.
All right. Thanks, Josh. All right. I'll keep an eye on it as they come in. All right, Chris, if it's okay with you, I'll go into public comment.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now is the time where we will allow for public comment. This is a sole opportunity for the members of the public to make a comment during this meeting. Members of the public may soon unmute and make a public comment should they desire. I do ask that the public comment remain brief and also pertain to the subject of broadband access. You may utilize the chat function in Zoom to let us know you would like to make a public comment as well. I will ask for public comment now. Second call for public comment.
Looks like maybe, Mike has a comment.
I have a comment, but can't. Oh, maybe his volume's not working. And then one more call for public comment. It won't let me pay, so he emailed it to you. I'll take a look at it, Mike, and respond. So thank you for that. And we'll keep moving on. Written public comment is also accepted on an ongoing basis. We have direction how to do so on our task force webpage, along with other information like meeting agendas, recording, and updates. One update I would like to notify the task force is that there is a new member, and that member is State Representative Randy Udell. But again, he's in session today, so is not able to attend. So I will kick it over back to Chris to get us going with the rest of the agenda.
All right, thank you, Mark. So today we have some updates from the PSC, and then we'll have a presentation after that, followed by some group discussion. So we'll kick things off today with Alyssa giving us an update on Public Service Commission. Alyssa.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Happy February, Wednesday, and bitter cold day, depending on where you are in the state of Wisconsin. I just wanted to share an update from last night with the task force. Last night, Governor Evers made his budget address, and not in the speech, but in the narrative sort of executive budget, there was mention of the task force and some addressing of some task force recommendations. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the task force and then read some of the executive budget from last night. And so in the executive summary, the governor writes that the task force of broadband access reported that there was 108,000 homes throughout Wisconsin that lacked 25x3 service. There was an additional 195,000 homes and businesses that lacked speeds of at least 100x20 from either a wired or a fixed wireless. The governor understands that access to reliable broadband and internet service is crucial for many aspects of today's society, including business, school, linking job seekers, employment, all things that we know. It goes on to say that the governor is recommending an investment in the state-funded broadband expansion grant program of $400 million from GPR. This funding will be to deploy fiber or high-speed fixed wireless infrastructure. And then the other piece, in addition to sort of the grant funding that was proposed in the budget, is that there is also a proposal to add additional consumer protections for broadband services that don't currently apply to telecommunications or video services. And so this would create additional protections, consumer protections for broadband service that's consistent with the speed and the delivery and the service interruptions, and that this would be a position at the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection Services. And so if you remember back from our first task force report, some of those consumer protections, consumer labels, some of those things were in the task force report and recommendations. And so I just wanted to make sure that members of the task force, the budget documents are a tad long. So I wanted to just bring that to folks' attention, that there was 2 pieces of the governor's budget last night that are from task force recommendations. So thanks to task force members. And then I'm going to pass it over to Rory, who's going to give some updates on our federal BEAD program timeline.
Thanks, Lisa. Nice to see the task force trickling into the budget. So BEAD updates, as we usually do, just want to give the task force a little update on our implementation of the BEAD program. Right now, we are in the thick of our subgranting process and things are moving quickly. I know a number of members on this call are actually participants in the BEAD program. So just a reminder that applications for the first round are due next week. Time flies. Our staff will dig into those applications right away and spend probably most of the month of March reviewing those. Kind of on a parallel track, we are starting to welcome our alternative technologies into the BEAD process. So folks not up with the lingo on BEAD, alternative technologies are unlicensed fixed wireless solutions as well as low Earth orbit satellite. Those 2 technology types are kind of seen as a backup technology in case we can't find a good licensed fixed wireless fiber cable type connection in certain areas of the state. So that process is starting with a letter of intent to ensure that those companies are qualified to participate, and that deadline is March 11th. Going on from there, we'll have additional subgranting rounds, both for our fiber and licensed fixed wireless folks, and then also our alternative technologies in kind of March, April, May, and then we'll be doing some direct negotiation and kind of wrap up work all the way through June, which will be kind of our target end date for our subgranting work, with a public comment in July and submission to NTIA. So we pack a lot in a couple months, but things are moving smoothly, I think, and excited to see where it goes from here. Can I pass it back to Chris? Chris, you're muted.
We're supposed to mute when we're not talking, and I forgot to unmute when I was talking. Sorry. Thank you for those updates. Was there anything else from PSC? Sorry. Yeah, we can move on. The next item on our agenda is actually a presentation. This is an invitation, I'm sorry, a presentation on workforce and artificial intelligence by Amy Pachacek. And Amy, I'm sorry if I got that wrong. Amy is the secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development. Amy.
Afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much, Chris. You were spot on with the last name. I appreciate it. So I'm Amy Pahacek. I'm the Secretary of the Department of Workforce Development. I do have a slide deck, Chris. I think it was sent over. Otherwise, I'm happy to share my screen if you all don't have it locked and loaded.
Yeah, go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, well, this could be an interesting little development here. Let me see if I can figure this out.
Yep, if not, I do have it.
It actually, Mark, it might be quicker for you just to pull it up.
Sounds good. Let me work on that.
Sure. And then while you're pulling up the deck, I can just sort of describe a little bit about the task force. So back in 2023, Governor Tony Evers did sign an executive order creating the first task force in the nation that was focused on workforce and artificial intelligence. So we were very proud to undertake that. This is the deck. Thank you so much.
Let me know
Yeah.
when you're ready to go to the next slide, and I can do that.
Oh yeah, I think you probably have to start the presentation.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we can hang out right here.
Yep.
This is perfect. Thank you. So so the governor did sign the executive order, and we convened the task force, and that is what I've been asked to speak about today. So I'll talk a little bit about the areas of conversation, the topics that we covered, and the recommendations of the task force. It does dovetail nicely with the work that you all are doing in the broadband space. In fact, you'll see when I get to my recommendations page, a lot of our work is very tightly aligned. But in order to understand AI and the workforce, I need to set the table a little bit about the state of the workforce here in the great state of Wisconsin. So coming out of the year 2025, Wisconsin has been on a record-breaking historic economic and workforce performance. So last year alone, we hit record high employment. We had more people working in the state of Wisconsin last year than ever before in the history of the state. We also had record high jobs, more jobs than ever before in the history of the state. We hit a labor force participation rate that was a full 3.4 percentage points higher than the national average, which is very significant when you're tracking on percentage points of labor force. And our unemployment rate was a full point lower than the national average, hovering at 3%, which is still what it is today. To give you some context on that, we broke the all-time lowest unemployment rate 2 years ago at 2.6%. So this is still very close, hugging that historic all-time low. So what does this mean? It means Wisconsin has record number jobs, more people working than ever before, more or less unemployed folks. So, more people working, less people and unemployment. And we broke a couple other records. So this will be important here in a second. So I'm just going to list off a few. We hit record high disability employment as well. We had a record number of both youth and registered apprenticeships with a record number of employer partners and a record number of new career pathways. And all of this, you can go to the next slide, is in light of the fact that Wisconsin actually has a labor and worker shortage. Now, this is not unique to Wisconsin. This is a problem that faces the entire nation. In fact, is a global issue. Right now, even China does not have enough workers to fill their economic demands. And this is a result of demographic trends that have been decades in the making. We know that our baby boomers are retiring. I'm sure you've all heard about this. They're continuing to exit the workforce through the year 2030. And as you'll see here, we level off in terms of the amount of workers available to us because we've had low birth rates for several generations. It takes 18 years to make a worker typically that's entering into the full workforce. And again, our last several generations have had low birth rates. And in Wisconsin, over the last 20 years, we've actually had net zero to negative in-migration into our state, meaning more people, even people who are born here, leave when they hit working age than individuals that are migrating to our state. So all of this has continued to put a huge crunch and a huge pressure on our workforce. Because remember, we have more jobs than we've ever had before. Next slide, please. So it is in sort of that backdrop that we went ahead and moved forward with the governor's task force on workforce and artificial intelligence. So if you all recall, ChatGPT, which is a very commonly used, open to the public, open source AI, generative AI app, came out in November of 2022. And really since then, the world of work, the world of play, the world of everything we do has been significantly altered. Artificial intelligence has actually been around for decades, but never really available at our fingertips like it became in November of 2022. And oh, sorry, there's messages popping up. So this has been, again, a significant way that is going to alter all aspects of our life. I actually was at a doctor's appointment just this morning, and the doctor asked if I minded if AI assistant came in and was just really on his phone and assisted with the doctor's visit. The AI took notes. The AI had recommended tests that the doctor should order. And I thought, here we are. This is really how we are working now in 2025. In fact, folks have been, my economists have deemed this, as well as many other economists around the world, as being the fourth industrial revolution, because AI is literally changing. It's expected to impact 300 million jobs, which is basically every job. There is not a job that is going to be 100% immune from some aspect, even if it's administrative support, of what this technology will do. Now, we have chosen to look at this in a very fortuitous and open way because we have that labor quantity challenge, as I just talked about. So what a wonderful time to have a technology that can come and augment aspects of people's work and therefore allow us to continue on this historic economic streak, moving full steam ahead, even without as many physical bodies to fill these positions. So we were the first task force in the nation that really focused on workforce, and we had the overarching principles that are very near and dear to the Evers administration, which is that of opportunity, access, equity, and really the thought of keeping the people at the center of this, because people is what is important to us. We know the robots are here, but the robots work for us. This technology is our technology. It works for us. So how can we ensure stability and consistency and that people are at the forefront during this industrial revolution, this next one? Go ahead, next slide, please. So our task force met and really looked at what are the most common occupations and industries that the people in our state are focused on. And this is important because, like I said earlier, our economists and economists all over the world are anticipating that AI is going to impact virtually every industry, every occupation to some degree. So we can't really look at a global marketplace for this. We wanted to focus our efforts and tailor it to the people in our state whom we serve, our 5.8 million people, and our biggest industries, and how do we protect our people and our industries here in the state. So the top two industries in our state, you may already be aware, are agriculture and manufacturing, but we broke it down not only in terms of looking at industries, but looking at how many people work in various positions. And then our economists, through research that they gathered with many other economists throughout the world who are studying this, really looked at those occupations that had the highest propensity to be augmented or supplemented from AI, or if you wanted to frame it in the negative, disrupted or particularly outsourced to AI functions. And we thought we would focus our efforts not only around the industries, but also those occupations most at risk. Next slide, please. So this is basically just a timeline of the activities of the task force. We met at various locations around the state. We had topics each meeting, and we really focused on Again, specific issues as it relates to the state of Wisconsin. Members of the task force, I should note, included technology giants. We had all the big tech leadership at the table with us: Google, Microsoft, Deloitte. We brought together private sector business. We had reps from healthcare, manufacturing, tourism. We also brought together private colleges and public universities, so higher education, our educational partners through K through 12, and of course, front and center was our labor partners. Very important to us to make sure we had labor representatives and other state and government officials as well. We went through each meeting and talked about various aspects of AI, did policy recommendations, and then came up with a final action plan, and I will go over that again, very high level. Next slide, please. So the task force ended up focusing on 4 areas: education, government, workforce development, and economic development. And all of our 4 areas here had specific policy recommendations under the framework, again, of how do we do this work and how do we make policy recommendations with people and access and equity and opportunity for all, as the framework of which we want to study these public policy issues. So again, that was our focus, and we will now, I'll kind of go through very high level each of the buckets and some of the recommendations that the groups finalized. So next slide. So education was a big one, right? And we talked about education at all levels, not only K through 12, but then also higher education, again, through our tech college partners, through public universities and private universities, but really looking at the full gambit of how people learn here in the state. So for K through 12, this is where access and opportunity really was a huge focus for the task force, for the group. We wanted to ensure that all of the kiddos in the state of Wisconsin had the opportunity and ability to learn this technology, learn digital literacy at a very early age, and have the ability to have the augmented AI advancements that actually are helping education and learning right now. There are many tools right now that even higher education and K through 12 districts are using to help supplement their learning of their students. So it's not only making sure that the students have access to digital literacy, to the technology, to broadband, to this type of way of which work is happening in the 21st century and beyond, but also that the skills were available to the teachers and to the administration to ensure efficient learning, targeted learning, and other functions that would help ensure that students could reach their full potential and capacity. So this included a lot of recruitment and retention and upskilling for our current teachers. And this, of course, included opportunity and access to make sure that all of the districts had technology. Now, I will put a little caveat because AI technology itself, the AI models, the tools, are actually very user-friendly and intuitive. It's almost like searching something on Google. I can't see your faces the way that my screen is set up, but I would take a poll to see how many people use ChatGPT, but it's like I just attended a seminar last week in Washington, D.C. with the Brookings Institute, and they basically said they've been studying how long it takes somebody who's never used an AI prompting model before to be fully proficient in it, and it's about 10 hours. So I don't think there's a whole lot of specific AI prompting classes that we need to indoctrinate to our children, make sure they learn it, but really what this is the ability to have critical thinking, analytical, logical skills, and of course, access to the technology to make sure that there isn't a digital divide that we know exists today, so that kids can get their hands on this technology, learn it, and help understand how it supplements their learning and how it really impacts the way that our economy is functioning. So we talked a lot about getting those skills again at the administration level of K through 12 for the teachers, and of course, having curricular development and instructional structural enhancements for the kids that helped improve their learning and helped the teachers teach. So very interesting stuff. At the higher educational levels, we talked a lot about micro-credentials because AI is going to help augment and offset a lot of the data analytics, a lot of the routine sort of dull and data intensive work that a lot of people do. Think of accounting, think of finance, right? A lot of the number crunching that already has been, augmented to a certain extent by just current tools that are available. But AI can take that further. They can actually draw new conclusions, create additional new models and new policies based on information. It kind of generative AI takes it further. And so looking at how those activities offset sort of the day-to-day functions of work and what that means when I'm going to school to be an actuary or an accountant. The world is still going to need people who are very astute in finance and can translate what an actuarial report means to the C-suite and to the policyholders if they're doing work for an insurance company. However, they probably won't be the ones having to do the statistical modeling anymore because AI really has the ability to take millions of data points, take it together, synthesize it, and draw conclusions at a rate that humans will just never be able to do. But again, we have a worker quantity challenge. So instead of looking at that as the end of days, we look at that as a wonderful way to keep moving forward more efficiently, effectively in service to people and keep our economy moving forward. So it was making sure we had micro-credentials for all types of educational where people could understand AI tools and AI assistance in how they do their everyday jobs. And of course, we do need people to build like models and understand technology in a way that will continue to advance technology here. So it was looking at how do we enhance credentials, degrees in various computer science fields where it makes sense. We know that coding is really something of the past now, that AI can do that coding, but we still need folks who are able to help assist with building models and translating how that, again, can move forward our economy and our workforce. And then the last thing I'll just say under the educational aspects for the recommendations was really an opportunity for using AI in research. So we know that a lot of our institutions have a lot of data. They've been doing a lot of research in terms of cancer, in terms of other aspects, social science research, poverty research, but making sure that our researchers who are at the forefront of some of the newest breakthroughs in all aspects of advancements in our world have this technology to assist them, to keep them competitive, to keep our universities at the forefront as we move forward. Next slide, please. Government. So this really, the focus was what can we control at a state level? I know a lot of conversation is out there around how do we regulate AI because it's a global sort of phenomenon and exists on networks that span the globe. Wisconsin doesn't have a lot of ability to do regulation in terms of large scale, but of course we can control in terms of what our government agencies are doing through our own administration and how we're protecting people's data and making sure that we don't have employees that are uploading confidential data into public models and trying to supplement their work. So what we did was focused on having some guardrails, some guidelines, but also making sure that we did have a space for innovation and use. And I'm happy to say that since this report came out in July of 2024, Wisconsin has now rolled out AI acceptable use policies throughout the enterprise. And so that we already sort of have that one first step here in this recommendation bucket already taken care of. We did want to have a governance and security position set up to support all aspects in the government administration with AI going forward. And really, again, making sure that we were able to, in a way that was efficient and effective administration of government and not putting folks personal information or biases, into the mix that could disproportionately impact stakeholders or constituents throughout the state. So lots of recommendations there about smart usage, about safe usage, and about usage that had equity and access at the forefront. There were also, next slide, please. Lots of specific recommendations for my agency and how do we enable the workforce and our current workers that are actually out in the labor force now to have the ability to be ready, flexible, nimble, and adopting these tools and making sure that we had various safety nets in place if there were sort of layoffs or jobs that began to be outsourced. We targeted those specific efforts now to, if you remember a couple slides back, we had certain occupations that were at highest risk. So really looking at folks in those occupations, in those industries now, and looking at upskilling opportunities so that as this entire workforce and the way we work transition, we can bring everybody along with us. Again, with a worker quantity challenge, we're going to need everybody who wants to work participating in this workforce. So we want to be able to give them the skills and the access and the opportunity that they need. And that, of course, includes access to broadband, access to the ability to get into and compete with this economy and be an active participant, really starts at the very first level, which is having access to broadband to connect to this entire ecosystem. Next slide, please. AI and apprenticeships, I think I'm kind of running up on time here, so I will just very briefly touch on this. Apprenticeships is very huge for us at the Department of Workforce Development. We have put a lot of strategic and intentional effort into expanding apprenticeships. For those of you who aren't familiar, Wisconsin is unique in our apprenticeship model. We were actually the first state in the nation back in 1911 to pass an apprenticeship law, codifying apprenticeship into our state programs, and it's a wonderful pathway to the workforce. And here's how it works, and here's how it's different than traditional pathways to the workforce, which is in Wisconsin, apprentices earn while they learn. So it flips the model of going to a 2-year technical college or a 4-year university on its head, because you do not have to A, take out a lot of student debt to get a credential or a degree, and B, you don't have to sit without earning money for several years while you're going to school. So apprentices get signed day one. They start earning money, not only for their hands-on work experience, but also for their associated time in the classroom. So you're literally paid to go to school and paid to learn while you have an employer sponsor. And that is the difference. And that's why this is such a huge tool and such an amazing pathway to the workforce. It connects our emerging workers with our current economy, helps with the brain drain. So we see less youth leaving our state because we've connected them already with a family sustaining, wonderful job opportunity. And we have expanded apprenticeships from your standard typical apprenticeship models, which are heavy into the trades, which are still some of the best, our highest enrolled and highest paying apprentices. But we have rolled this out to healthcare, to IT, to finance, to cybersecurity, to organic farming. We have literally, if there is an industry, we've got a pathway, and if we don't have it yet, call me because we'll get it set up. But this has been a huge and an amazing way, and we want to incorporate AI apprenticeships not only in our IT and technology pathways, but also for basically every other apprenticeship that currently exists, because as I said earlier, AI is going to touch every industry and every occupation to some degree. Go ahead to the next slide. And I think we're coming to the end here because I want to make sure if you all have questions that I'm here to answer them. But the report also talks a lot about economic development. So there was a U.S. Census Bureau survey that was done last summer, I think it was in July of 2024, that actually surveyed all the states and businesses and found that the state of Wisconsin is leading the nation in early AI adoption. Now, that was an employee-weighted survey, meaning our larger employers that are heavy on AI adoption here in the state of Wisconsin, like Rockwell Automation, like Johnson Controls, like Harley Davidson, like Oshkosh Defense, and all of which I've toured and seen the extent and level of which they are using AI and robotics to, continue their work functions, they've really sort of set the tone and are way ahead of many of their competitors, which is amazing. But we know that it's not only these giant employers that need to adopt and adapt to this, because even our small and local business owners, medium-sized businesses are competing on a global level. And those folks are the backbones of our communities throughout the state, of our main streets, of our downtowns. And we have to ensure that all of our businesses have access to the resources to adopt this technology, to really secure not only our workforce, but our whole economy and industry profile going forward. And not all our small and medium businesses have the capital investments to fully engage in this technology. It can be expensive to do full IT overhauls or to incorporate some of these things into your workflows. So how do we as a state help support and uplift our businesses? Well, there are many recommendations the task force came up with, including incentivizing small businesses either through tax breaks or grants to have the resources to adopt this technology, doing subsidized training through chambers of commerce, through our local business centers, and providing resources and sort of a roadmap for how businesses can navigate this new industrial revolution and way of work going forward. Next slide. So I think this is the last slide, and I'll just end here. There is a 45-page report with very specific recommendations from the task force. I know everyone's dying to read it. Throughout that entire report, access to broadband is highlighted in almost every area for all of the different buckets, because we know, again, it starts at that basic connection point and ensuring that our workers, our schools, our businesses, all of the people in our great state have access, right? That we can overcome, hopefully, the digital divide and create access for everybody. So that is sort of at the heart of everything. We know that this technology is going to be critical in how we work and how we move forward. So, of course, the great work that you all are doing and that the PSC has been doing for years to ensure access as an economic opportunity and equity piece is really, really important work. So I think I'll just end here, and we can put in the chat the link to the final report if you really want to read all the very specific recommendations. It's on DWD's website. But I just wanted to thank you all for your excellent work, for your service to the people of the state. It is so critically important to our workforce and our economy, and we really appreciate your expertise and your time in service to the people. So that is all I have. Happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you, Amy. We'll open up to questions from the task force. What questions do we have?
Not a one. All right. I think there
I have a
may have
question.
been popping up in the chat. So, go ahead.
Yeah, so when you speak upon the apprenticeship program, are those primarily union supported apprenticeship programs? Or these?
Yeah. So, it's let me kind of explain. So we've got youth apprenticeship, which are supported through the school districts. So that's right now I have nearly 10,000 youth apprenticeships. So again, those are junior and senior level students who are gaining work experience and getting paid for real life, additional classwork. And on-the-job experience. So that's the first set of apprenticeships. Then I have registered apprenticeships, which is for adults, kids, or folks that are not in school, so not the kiddos. I have 18,000 right now apprentices that are registered. Of those 18,000, slightly over 10,000 are through union apprentices. Those are primarily in the trades. Again, some of the best, highest paid apprentices that we have. Welders are 85,000 year one in some parts of the state. So those are our electricians, our laborers, roofers, pipe fitters, the whole gambit, and amazing work, lots of opportunity there. And then the other 8,000 are in all of these new areas. Healthcare, we have our first 4-year registered nursing apprenticeship, the first one in the nation, rolled out last year, but we also have CNAs, respiratory therapists, medical assistants. We have organic farming, arborists. We have the whole list. Again, cybersecurity, IT, HR apprentices, admin. For any type of work people are doing, there is some type of apprentice that could be supporting it. So we're really excited. We rolled out a teacher apprenticeship as well last year. We're going to continue to do that because it really is a wonderful way to enter the workforce.
A quick
Thank you.
question. Thank you, Amy. Do you have any breakouts geographically? And I'm especially interested in a growing percentage that may be coming from rural areas since this is a broadband task force.
Break out geographically for apprentices
For the
or
apprentice program, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I do. We actually, Bob, we have I have 30 economists that work at the Department of Workforce Development, some of the smartest folks you'll ever meet. And I have economists in every single district around the state. We have 11 different workforce districts, so they're broken out by regions. And we have economists that are in all of those areas, and they actually can run any type of I shouldn't say any, many types of economic data for, and it's all free for members of the public. We've got a great website called Wisconomy where you can run reports on your own about number of apprentices, a number of people in various occupations by zip code, average wages that people earn by industry and occupation by zip code. But if you don't want to click through and figure out the website yourself, we can find the business service team that's also on there who supports whatever region you're interested in, Bob, and they can run all the reports for you, and they can even tailor them. So I'm here to also peddle the services of my team. They're eager and willing and ready to help in any kind of economic data you might want. And if they can't get it or they don't have it at their fingertips, they probably know how to get it for you. And again, at no cost. So I would also encourage folks to do that. But yes, we have all kinds of wonderful information from our Economic Bureau.
Other questions?
All right, Chris. Well, I'll let you get back to it the rest of your meeting. Thank you so much for having me. If anybody has a question, feel free to email Chris or whoever is sort of running the task force. They can forward it to me and my team, and we will absolutely get back to you ASAP. We're always here and happy to help. So thank you so much. And again, thank you for your service on this task force.
Amy,
Thank
any contact information or documents you reference, have them send them to me and I'll send them out to the
You.
task
Okay,
force
great.
members.
Yes, Mark will be the conduit. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, thank you, Mark. I was going to say to save a step, send them to Mark, because when you send them to me, I'll send them to Mark.
Sorry, Chris.
No, you're perfectly fine. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks.
All right. Well, after that, we're going to move into some group discussion. We had quite a bit of time carved out for this today. We're going to have some group discussions around AI and workforce. And Jessica is going to lead us on that today. Jessica?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. Yeah, let's start. Let's keep the presentation we just saw in mind. And let's start with that discussion. So last time, if you were here in January, you would remember that or hopefully you would remember that we talked a little bit about what the task force might want to focus on for 2025. And because this time we had a presentation, I thought I might take it back to let's talk about, based on the presentation you just heard, are there any additional areas of focus for 2025 that the task force can address related to today's presentation? So then we can make sure that we add those to the list that we started back in January. So and then I'm also going to ask what more might we need to know in order to fully understand how AI affects Wisconsin workforce and industry. But we'll start with the first question. And let's just keep this casual, open, big group discussion. If any task force members would like to share their thoughts on this question, then you can unmute or put it in the chat either way. Mark will let me know if something goes in the chat, right, Mark? And then I'll type for us. Oh, Rachel, yes, please.
I apologize. There was so much great information that she shared, and perhaps it's in the report, but I guess I'm wondering what predictions there are, or perhaps already identified needs related to broadband to have the speeds that are needed for education, industry to be able to use AI and use. I know there is a lot of data that's generated, right? A lot terabytes of data, and that it requires a lot of storage. But in terms of active broadband use, I think that's something that I'm interested in understanding better.
Did I capture this right? Identify needs related to broadband that would allow people to use AI?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Jessica, the University of Wisconsin has spent a fair amount of time and effort, and I think expense, to expose teaching staff to AI in in post-secondary education. So I think I would recommend that we add primary and secondary education to that. As a way to prepare people for um, uh, various kinds of internships and getting into the trades and pre-university use.
Thank you so much. I feel like I captured that word for word.
Poor you.
No, it was fine.
Jessica, this is related to Rachel's comment about identifying the needs related to broadband use in AI. It's, it's predicted to just exponentially grow. So, what are identifying the needs right now is important, but potential future needs, and there's been a lot of conversation about the amount of electricity that is needed to power these storage capacities that are needed for AI. So there might need to be future conversations about the utility expansion on the power grid related also to technology and telecommunications.
Did I capture that okay for you? Except for the extra E in need.
I do that too. Looks good.
Okay, great. I know some of these might fall into the what more do we need to know. I can separate those out. For now, I'll just take your notes and when you think about things that the task force might and could study and address, what comes to mind for you related to AI and workforce and what you just heard? I see you, Chris. Go ahead. If you were
I was
planning.
waiting for others.
Oh, okay.
No, that's okay. The thing that I think because this is the world I live in with AI, And you're right, there's a lot of infrastructure needs to run it. But more importantly, most people don't understand AI. A lot of people are afraid of it. And I guess from the standpoint of a workforce, I think we need to understand where pain points are for people. I think people hear AI and they think, oh, that's the thing that's going to get rid of my job, make me unnecessary. And that's not the case. As AI expands, I bet broadband's certainly very important to that. But I think capacity is what's really going to be important. As more and more folks in rural areas are using AI and tools like that, the bandwidth we're expanding now is going to start to get used. And I think one of the things we need to be aware of is those areas where we maybe had a less than optimal implementation, and we'd love fiber everywhere, but some places are fixed point wireless. I think those are areas we'll want to continue to watch to make sure that we're still meeting the needs as they grow from a bandwidth standpoint.
Did I capture that, Chris?
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah, I
Okay.
think it's really about awareness and thinking about what AI means to broadband utilization.
Anything else for this? Go ahead, Bob. Oh,
There, I
yep.
think I'm unmuted now. All right. I think she hit on this, but AI use and understanding the impacts of prompts is probably something that needs to be available to very basic level. And so I would just like to make sure that we get this on the list, that understanding where prompts lead you to good responses and where they lead you to information that is not accurate. I think it is something that we can at least make sure that we have on our list as well.
No, that's great. And I didn't delete everything. I kept it all. It's just in the I saw someone unmute, but
I'll unmute Michelle Schuler, Microsoft. I think under the what more do we need to know to fully understand how AI affects Wisconsin's work in industry is it's changing so fast that I don't like how do we keep up with, it's like I just think that it's changing so fast. Even if you just leave that, like it's a constant evolution. Yeah, I don't know how much else to say. I think just that
no,
constant evolution is probably the biggest thing right now.
I wonder, and Michelle, please correct me if I'm wrong. I wonder if what I'm hearing is sort of like this shouldn't be an afterthought, like because it's changing so much. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but like there's a kind of a like we need to do our best to keep up. Is that?
Yeah, and I think it's AI, you can't silo it in just one job. Like all jobs are going to be affected by AI. So how do we keep up the talent and innovation so that everybody is ready?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think someone else was. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Lori. I was just going to kind of add to what Bob and I'm sorry, is it Michelle said? If you think about how fairly recently we started talking about adoption and helping folks adopt simply the connection to broadband and how to use it. Now we're adding on another layer with AI, and it's going to be important to also teach everyone. including our older generations, who we haven't talked about yet today, to be able to use AI effectively and get the answers that are correct and that are the answers they're looking for. So it made my mind go back to that adoption conversation, and that, Gail can talk more about this than I can, but the ways that we're reaching out in the communities to educate folks. This is going to be another part of that education.
My apologies, Lori. I was listening to what you said this time, and then I stopped typing instead. So please help me articulate how can we reach and educate? I think you were getting at all, like
all, yes,
yes,
all populations, regardless of age or location or any of that.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, thank you. Kind of parroting on Bob's conversation, Michelle and Lori's conversation, what we're essentially facing right now with the development and continued growth, exponential growth of AI, I think what we're focusing on is essentially our ability to control data governance, which goes into how AI functions with regards to AI governance. And ultimately, what are we doing to essentially train AI to such extent that it allows for a more natural approach to data stewardship and the ultimate responsible use of AI, if I'm understanding that properly.
I think it dovetails very nicely. Any other final thoughts on either of these two questions? I don't think this is the end of the conversation either, so. Okay. I'm going to move us on to the next part of our discussion together. We are going to do some small group discussions again, which I think are all teed up and ready to go. But I wanted to start by this really wordy slide. I know you're never ever supposed to do this, right? When you have slides. But I thought it was important here to bring up the different tasks that the task force is responsible for according to Executive Order 80. And the reason I wanted to keep all the wording in here, originally I was going to summarize it or, approach it that way. And I realized, wait, as you're in your small groups, you might want to pop back up to the slide and take a peek because you're going to be working right within the slide deck. So you might want to take a peek and remind yourself of, the different tasks that we have before us. So really quickly, especially for those who are new, I'll at least go over the high level things. So the task force is responsible for researching and recommending forward-looking broadband policies and initiatives that address the state broadband goals and needs, promoting the efficient strategic expansion of the broadband facilities and adoption across the state, exploring and developing solutions in collaboration with key broadband stakeholders and experts, identifying and preparing technical or white papers on top priority issues concerning broadband in Wisconsin as necessary. And then the big one of reporting to, it's not the big one, it's just the longest one, reporting to the governor and the legislature annually by June 30th on all I through 1 through 8 that are listed here. And so I'm not going to read through all of those, but I wanted to leave this slide in here with all of the wording from Executive Order 80 from that section of Executive Order 80 so that you could pop back up as you're in your group and just kind of remind yourself or familiarize yourself if maybe you're a newer member with what the charge is. And so that's your charge as a task force. We have an accelerated time period right now, right? Because we have a report in June. And so I'd like you to keep some of that in mind. So, the things that are here, what your charge is. I'd like you to keep some of that in mind whenever we have these discussions. And I'll keep this slide in any activity that we're doing together. I'll keep this slide in so that you can pop back over to it and look at it if you need to. So going back to what we did last month, as a reminder, especially for those who weren't able to make it last time, we talked about, brainstormed what task force members would like to achieve in 2025. And then we looked at all of those things we listed out and we talked about, well, what strengths do we already have that can help us make progress on these goals? So what I've done today is we are going to have 4 different groups. I grouped all of those answers that you guys gave last time about the things that we could focus on. I grouped them by topic, and we have 4 groups again. And in your group, you're going to talk about, you're going to take each of these items, you're going to talk about 2 questions. What do we need to learn more about or understand better in order to make progress on this focus area? And then the other question is, who can we learn from or how can we find out more? Because you guys, you're invited here for a reason. You know about other resources and other things we can tap into, and maybe even what some other states and agencies are doing. So perhaps, you'll also be able to fill in some information about other people we might be able to connect with in order for us to find out a little bit more. So what you're not going to see here are the strengths that we talked about last time, and that's intentional. We're going to put it all together. But for today, I just want you to focus on what do we need to learn more about or understand better in order to make progress. And then if you've got some information on who else we could learn from, then by all means, put it in there as well. Are there any questions about what I'm asking you to do? Or Mark, is there anything that I missed here?
Nope, all good. Just keep in
Okay.
mind again, going through this, future meetings, we will go back and, look at this stuff along with looking at what we did last year and reviewing progress and compare these discussions to last year's discussions and along with those goals and themes.
Yes. Thank you, Mark. I knew I was going to need you to do that. Thanks. So you're going to have, Mark, could you remind me, is it 15 minutes per question or was it?
Alyssa, I wasn't able to get that in.
I can open the rooms.
Okay.
Yep. What's the time? What time do you have for the rooms?
Oh, was I supposed to set a time?
I mean, I can set a timer on my phone and.
Oh, yep, I can set a timer. Breakout rooms will close after 15 minutes.
Yep.
That sounds good. So now this is per question. Is that, apologize. We did plan all of this ahead of time, but I just want to double check that I'm correct. Okay.
Yep. And then if you don't need a full 15, just pop back into here. And I believe Alyssa and I will be able, or I'll be.
That sounds great. And if you didn't finish your conversation in the first 15 minutes, when we pop you back out into the breakout rooms again, you'll be able to wrap that up a little bit. So, okay.
Thank you. I'm going to stop.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
I'm going to keep my screen sharing on, and I'll kind of do a little bit of sharing so there isn't dead space.
I got popped back in. Can you put me into group 4, I think? I'm sorry. That was weird.
Yeah, sorry.
It must have been me.
Oh, and Brittany, of course, it shows you in that room for me.
Oh no. Should I,
Did you try to join?
I see, I have an invitation to a different room, so that's good. I'm gonna do,
Sorry, I couldn't get you in the same room.
yeah, no problem.
Anyone? Um, did I miss any task force members that
Looks
are
like
not in
everybody.
a room? Please speak up.
Oh, looks good. Thank you.
Okay. I appreciate the PSC staff being in each room. That helps a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just kind of go through and kind of show a little bit about what's happening, and maybe narrate a little just in case that's helpful for some people.
Hope Angie's back.
They're really digging in and getting started typing already.
See if I can get Angie to a room. Did you get kicked out of a room, Angie?
I think I think I did it to myself.
I'm
Oh,
gonna
no.
throw you in a random room.
All right, thank you.
Some good questions in group 1. What is the drop-off rate of ACP? How much are we moving backwards? How do we adjust pricing tiers? Regulations on providers. Impacts cost.
Mark, do you want me to try to assign
Yep,
Angie?
yep. I was just about to say, yep, it's not working for me. I'm like, where is it?
All right, Angie, what number were you in?
I think 1. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah.
Thank
You must
you.
have the control because normally it just lets me.
Very dangerous.
So group 2 is working on the advocate for funding beyond BEAD to ensure comprehensive coverage, addressing potential gaps in underserved areas. How to educate counties to be more selective in their support. And not seeing coordination between middle mile and last mile. Group 3 is thinking hard. So group 4 is working on ensure representation of all constituencies, including high-cost areas, tribal communities, and low-income populations. So what do we need to learn more about or understand better? What is our baseline? What has been done in the past? What works and doesn't work? And then what's the definition of representation? What does representation look like? Oh, I forgot to mention that they each have if they wanted to add more that isn't on the list, that they could.
Go back to that next
I'll
round.
mention it when they come back. Yeah. Provide support to ISPs in the BEAD application process. I can change that. I just went based on what was there before. I feel bad about these peaks and valleys here. I couldn't get rid of them.
That's all right. We just go back, consolidate into more slides and
Yeah. I'll just want to make sure that I know that these are not, because this slide was originally for additional things, so I want to make sure that I don't. It doesn't matter, but okay. Continue efforts to remove barriers to construction and expedite the building process with a focus on improving permitting procedures. What do we need to learn more about? Challenge understanding unknown. There's a challenge understanding the unknowns. An unsure business environment, supply chain bottlenecks. Ensure representation of all constituencies. Who can we learn from? Providers who put in new infrastructure. Oops. That was the end. There's a lot to say in advocating for funding beyond BEAD.
that has been a past task force recommendation for sure. So always important for task force members to bring up.
There will be issues with last mile providers with nowhere to connect it to. Lack of understanding by the counties. As task force, understand how it's being coordinated. Okay. Like the bullets this group is using. Focus on improving broadband adoption rates and studying understanding barriers to adoption. Things we need to understand more about are barriers to adoption due to lack of service, cost, or other barriers. Understanding there are households that decline broadband, but not having a clear understanding of why. Or we don't have a clear understanding of why is what I think that means. Now these guys have moved on to one of the others. Mitigate risks to BEAD funding due to potential changes in priorities. What do we need to learn more about? Are providers doing what they said they were going to do? Don't know if the plan is the reality or not. Focus on improving workforce development and job outcomes across the state. What do we need to learn more about or understand better? And this group is saying encouraging AI and work with tech schools and DPI. How to train educators to impact our students. How digital navigation can best include AI. All right. So address the specific needs of wireless providers and cell service expansion, particularly in permitting and faster deployment. So use state budget dollars to limit the use of unlicensed and temporary solutions in favor of more robust investment or proven longer-term solutions. Supplement BEAD with state dollars to extend fiber. I can't see what that LFW solutions. It's too small.
For licensed fixed wireless.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know if it was an I or an L. Okay. Use state budget dollars to supplement BEAD expenditures. Great. These teams are working fast.
Yep, we're coming up on the 1-minute warning.
Okay. Perfect. They'll
Yep.
want more time to go through because they're working fast, but they're not finished.
Right. Yep.
So they'll want the additional time for that.
Yep. Yep. So good thing we're able to get more time for the discussion this meeting. Yep.
I think, would you prefer, my inclination is usually to ask them to do a report out. Would you prefer that I just wait until the end? Like, yeah.
We go report out, then go back and do it after.
Okay. That's my preference anyway, so that's good. Let's see. Okay, we went over that one. Okay, so provide support to ISPs in the BEAD implementation process. How do we robustly utilize what we've built? What happens after construction? Understanding maintenance and ongoing expenses for networks.
They should be coming up here in a few seconds.
Okay, great. So is everyone back, Mark?
Yep.
Okay, great. So just like usual practice, I'm going to ask for a volunteer from each of the teams to share a little bit about your discussion. And then we're going to go back in and you're going to be allowed to finish as much as you're able to with your discussion. But while you're doing some of your report outs, I also, if you've got questions about, if you got questions that came up, bring those up now as well. So, affordability and adoption, who is willing from group 1? Who's willing to give a short report out?
All right, I'll report out for group 1. So our topic was affordability and adoption, as you see, and we kind of focused on the first 2 focus areas. The first being how to address the end of ACP and exploring replacement solutions. First considering what was the major drop-off rate of ACP, and then trying to understand how much we've moved backwards with ACP ending, and then considering how providers can potentially adjust pricing tiers because of the end of ACP, and then also looking at the kind of impacts to providers due to regulations, which is passed down often to customers, which affects their affordability potentially. So looking at those pricing tiers. And then we also discussed kind of with the change of administration, if there's going to be any changes to federal programs that might affect affordability to customers through some of these programs.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second bit here, focusing on improving broadband adoption rates, we kind of circled around trying to understand what the barriers to adoption are, whether it's a lack of service, cost, or other barriers. Understanding why some households might decline broadband, and getting a better understanding of why that may be. And then thinking about if there's a component of competition for why some adoption rates are lower in certain areas, and then other potential constraints to adoption, which may include cellular or mobile broadband. And then just some folks brought up the fact that people are comfortable in the way they've used the internet, maybe primarily on their cell phone. So kind of understanding some of those barriers. And the last thing we kind of talked about was ensuring I can't even read this, sorry. The continuation of existing programs that support families in affording broadband, sort of assessing the value of programs and understanding how those, or if those funds have been used effectively. And then also kind of what we can learn or how we can find out more is hopefully hearing from some people that have benefited from these programs and understanding their experience with it for being able to afford a broadband service.
So I'm curious about this, where it says, what's the impact or usefulness of ACP or similar types of programs when we consider next steps? Is that a suggestion here that for how we can find out more is studying what the impact or usefulness of ACP is? Is that what that was about?
Yeah, I think it's kind of in the same vein as this other kind of understanding the impacts that people that were in ACP or people that benefited from the program, understanding what those impacts were.
Yeah, kind of like evaluation,
Totally.
Bit of,
Yes.
evaluation. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. Any questions that came up for you guys? You would have brought it up, I'm sure, but I forgot to mention that each group got a second slide as well, and that was really for either overflow, which I think the next group used it for overflow, or it was for if you thought of some other thing that we're missing that should be there. So please do, when you go back into your breakout rooms, feel free to use that space for either overflow or if you think of some additional things that should belong there, additional focus areas. Okay.
Real quick.
Group 2. Oh, go ahead.
Quick. There is data on that ACP effectiveness, and can get that data up.
There is data?
There is.
Okay.
So.
Yes.
Yes,
Can you
Gail.
clarify, are we commenting if that wasn't our question on that, or are we going to have an opportunity to add to like that adoption if we were in affordability, if we were in another group?
Yeah, good. That's a very good question. I want you to have the opportunity to do that. Are you going to have the opportunity today? Is I think probably the other question. So,
I'm just wondering if you wanted any additional from this now on each question, or if you plan that for another day. That's all.
I would be open. If you've got something, give it to me.
Okay, on that first affordability and adoption, on the second one where we talk about improving broadband adoption and studying understanding barriers, I also would be interested in doing more learning about what are those take rates and those lack of adoption doing for our providers, our ISPs. I mean, I've been hearing they need certain take rates and we need people to adopt in order to make BEAD work. And so that's something I think looking at those barriers and the impacts it has to our internet service providers.
Yeah. Oh, so what's the impact?
For lack of adoption. Yep. On take rates and lack of adoption.
Thank you very much. Anything
I
else?
think we need to look at both sides.
Yeah, I agree. Can I move on to group 2? I'm feeling good about it. Okay, group 2, who's going to share a little bit about your conversation?
I can go ahead. Yeah, so we really only got to touch base on one of these areas of focus, and it stemmed a lot of great conversation. So for advocate for funding beyond BEAD to ensure comprehensive coverage, addressing potential gaps in underserved areas, what do we need to learn more about or understand better to make progress on this focus? So our group talked about how there's been lots of participation with broadband groups in different counties, and they see different ISPs approaching these counties, and those counties will then provide support, which will in turn saturate the market. And so we'd like to figure out how to educate counties to be more selective in their support, so that the best ISP for that area will get selected, as opposed to just having it be as it is. We also discussed, some group members have been in the industry for many years and they have seen a lot of mistakes. There's a concern about not having coordination between middle mile and last mile. So if an ISP does get BEAD funding to build, it doesn't necessarily ensure connectivity. And the issue of not too many providers in rural areas, which can lead to poor connections and expensive services as well. And then again, with the issues with the last mile and the providers and where to connect it, if they don't really understand, if the counties themselves don't really understand how to be more selective with ISPs, then the issues would just continue forward. And then just having the task force understand how all of those things are connected and coordinated. And then we had some overspill on the next page. Mitigate risks to BEAD funding due to potential changes in priorities. So the questions of, are providers doing or going to do what they said they were going to do? We don't really know if what is planned is the reality. So if there could be some kind of a mechanism to understand, as a task force, all of the different kinds of environmental, construction, permitting, labor risks that might come up for BEAD funding. And who can we learn from, or how can we find out more? We could go to unions, being more in sync with unions. Sorry, this kind of spills over, so it's hard to read.
I was trying to help.
Yeah, thank you. Ensuring that the DNR is being responsible and working with tribal groups and SHPO, ensuring environmental reviews are completed, and then also taking a look at where the work is being completed, You know, it's obvious when it's more urban, semi-urban, semi-rural, but we're really still unsure of what's left out there in that rural area for connection. And also meeting with the contractors that are coming from out of the state, and just sort of having a vetted process for that to make sure that they are of quality and not doing the work that they're supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
And
Thank
feel
you.
free to chime in if I missed anything with our group 2 discussion.
And if anyone else has something that they would like to add.
I think one of the things when you were talking about tribes and who could we learn from, I think the changing landscape with the permitting piece and that being pulled back from BIA and to the federal level and what that might mean is something that it might be helpful for us to understand.
How should I add that in here, Gail? Like understanding of the changing federal landscape.
Yep, and I somewhere she had tribal down below. And I just think hearing from BIA would be important as well as we look at that permitting issue.
So I'll also, okay. Got it. Anyone else want to add to this? What's being said here? Ooh, that's bold. Didn't mean for it to be bold. All right, I'm gonna move on to group 3. Who's ready to chat here?
I could take a crack at reporting out, but if the team has anything else from our group, feel free to chime in. You know, I think we kind of starting at the top of our table. I'm sorry it's small. I try to fit everything on one page. We talked a little bit about kind of barriers to construction and kind of building process. You know, I think there's some business uncertainty with the, you know, some supply chain bottlenecks that seem to somehow never go away or shift around to different equipment and things. We talked a little bit about tariffs and kind of the impact on how that's going to flow through to different manufacturing components and things like that, and kind of trying to anticipate and get ahead of that. Also just kind of, you know, a little bit acknowledging that not every construction project will go initially as planned, and kind of setting yourself up with the processes and systems so that when something changes, if it's supply chain problems or design problems or whatever it is, that there's kind of a system and a process to deal with that and address that early, often, quickly, and kind of nimbly. Talking a little bit more about kind of supporting that implementation process, I think like answering questions like, just because there's infrastructure in the ground doesn't mean that necessarily is always improving the consumer experience. I know this overlaps a little bit with some of the stuff we've talked about before, but, you know, making sure that, you know, the right equipment's installed at the customer premises, you know, people have the right Wi-Fi router and things like that, so that they actually experience the speeds that are ending up at their doorstep. Kind of generally just starting to explore and lean into that question of, you know, how do we more robustly utilize what we've built so far? Talked a little bit about permitting, you know, the endless difficulty and challenge of permitting, and just trying to find ways to keep chipping away at that. You know, from just speeding up state highway DOT approvals to kind of rethinking how we plan and anticipate permitting issues, and also kind of just facilitating that conversation and kind of building those trusting relationships to kind of keep a good open line for tribal consent, you know, facilitating that discussion when and where it's appropriate. And then kind of talking a little bit about wireless providers, and kind of, I know we talked a little bit about alternative technologies during my BEAD update. You know, I think one thing that came up and was discussed a little bit was maybe finding opportunities to sequence in and use state dollars to kind of supplement some of those BEAD expenditures in kind of the further flung and more remote areas where we're just not able to, with BEAD funding, to build that high-speed fiber or high-speed fixed wireless type solution. So finding ways to kind of supplement that and limit the need to Bob put this better than I did, kind of just put in more short-term solutions and try and find some more long-term solutions for that. So I think that was kind of one consideration when talking about kind of cell and wireless expansion as well. Anything else I missed? Bob? Oh, Bob's off mute. Bob, anything to add?
No, I think you summed it up well. Looking for ways to maximize the reliance on long-term solutions, which I know is going to be difficult because it's very expensive to put long-term solutions in with the BEAD money we've been given.
Thank you. Anyone else have something they'd like to add to this? This also isn't the very last opportunity that you'll have to do that.
Jessica, hi, this is Mike.
Yes. Hi, Mike.
Actually, based on, what was done in this particular group and Rory's comments, and actually back on Gail's comment as well, looking at the permitting process, working through, mainstream permitting, with Gail's comment on how the BIA does things, it does get pretty complex. Understanding, from tribal government perspectives, we have some properties that are, reservation status. That's easy enough. But we do get pretty complex with some tribes where we deal with fee simple lands, we deal with airship and allotment lands, and we deal with trust lands. Trust lands actually, trust reservation going through BIA for some of it. Some of it can be approved by the tribes. But then we get into those more sticky situations with airship and allotment where we actually have to go through the families and having to get 50% or more, 51%, approval from the heirs of that particular property. And then when you have checkerboarded, properties like Ho Chunk as an example, where you can have one community where part of it is trust, part of it is airship and allotment, part of it is fee simple. So working with the ISPs and helping the ISPs understand, permitting isn't done at just the township. It isn't done at just the county level. It can be quite the cumbersome and long drawn out process. From the state perspective, working through all of the tribal governments in Wisconsin, what kind of pressure can, the collective of Wisconsin, whether it be, in partnership with the state and between all of the tribes, Glitzy, whoever that may be, how can we streamline and fast track these processes through BIA?
Well, two things, Michael, that I'm hearing. First of all, I'm hearing that BIA is another one that we should add into who can we learn more from. But I also feel like I should put Michael Rave on here as well. Because the amount of work I could imagine that has been. I mean, I said that jokingly, but I'm serious.
It's been a nightmare.
Yeah.
Mike, just give them a rough idea of a timeline. It is to went from fee simple to trust.
From fee simple to trust, it takes about 2 to 3 years.
Wow.
Permitting process in and of itself, we can get things done as quick as 3 months. It can be up to a year.
I won't put your name down specifically, but we're going to keep you in mind. All right, I'm going to move us on to group 4. Again, if you had something that you wanted to add in there, you know what? There also is this additional slide for group 3. Anyone's allowed to go in there and add it. Just don't type over someone else, is all I'm asking. Or you can go right into their slide, but put your initials after it, please, so that if they have a question, if the group has a question about what you put, or put your name after it, then they can ask you about that, okay? I just want to get us moved on, and I don't want to lose any great thoughts because you guys are here because of your expertise in your fields. So the group 4, comprehensive representation, who's willing to chat and share a little bit about what happened here.
I
Your
can share for
conversation,
our
not what
group.
happened.
Sure.
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
So our group got to the first two focus areas, and for the first one, some learning points that were discussed were figuring out what our baseline is, specifically based on past experiences. So what's been done in the past and what's worked and what hasn't, and learning more, understanding what representation is, or like how representation is defined. So what representation would look like. So then we can know maybe more of where we want that representation and who we can learn from and how we can find out more. It was suggested that we could look to providers who put in new infrastructure, and look at information on who uses those services. So that we can make assumptions off that information and that infrastructure that's in place currently. And it really was emphasized that this is important for sustainability. And then for that, where do we want representation? Learning point, it was suggested to look at case studies. And then for the second focus area, some learning points that were brought up were how to encourage AI, specifically working with tech schools and DPI, how to train educators to impact students, how digital navigation can best include AI, how to teach people to embrace and trust AI, and then looking into digital literacy more, specifically what media to trust and what guardrails to use when using AI, and who we can learn from and how we can find out more. It was suggested to look directly to companies to see what they need or don't need.
I was looking for the case studies. I remember seeing that comment, but I don't see it here anymore.
It's this right here in the second box.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. All right, great. Is there anything that comes to mind for anyone else related to Group 4's discussion? Quickly. Is there anything that quickly comes to mind? Okay. Are you guys ready to go back in and finish your conversations? All right.
Jessica, how many minutes would you like me to give people?
Yeah, 7, because then we can come back and quickly go over them, and then if anybody has any comments left after that.
Yeah, and again, if your team is finishing up and you wanted to add something to another team's, just don't overtype with anyone. And I'm good with you adding your own comments, but make sure you put your name next to it so the team can ask you a question if they need to. So, okay, thanks everyone. See you in a little bit. I guess I can make this. I know it's small, but we can see where they're typing. I didn't mean for this to be bold. Group 3 is, it looks like group 3 kind of systematically is working through the questions one by one. So now they're working on the who can we learn from or how can we find out more. And when it comes to developing more efficient processes for broadband deployment, they've started to brainstorm about local practitioners of permitting issues being a good source for learning more. And group 1 is adding some, or someone is, we don't know if it's group 1 or if it's one of the other task force members or one of the other groups. All right, so project planning on part of the county or municipality is how we can find out more about some of these group 2's focus areas. And just as a reminder, group 2 is primarily talking about funding beyond BEAD. And group 1 is affordability and adoption. One person knows their acronyms, FERPA and SEPA. What can we do and how can we improve processes for broadband deployment? Yes. Right. Seems like this must be coming from the group itself because they're adding things like looks like group 3 is possibly also moving on to adding some additional focus areas. And group 4 is using this as a little bit of a overflow because this shift focus toward public needs rather than primarily on elected officials. That was a comment during January that was about the task force focus area, focusing on elected officials. Do you know how much time is left, Mark?
30 seconds.
Thank you, Melissa. Everyone's coming back. Is everyone back?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. All right, let's do some quick report outs. Is there anything new that you would like the rest of the task force to know about that you discussed in your group? You guys were busy. I saw you typing like mad. So group 1.
I can speak for group 1. So we talked about changes at the federal level, which we hear about in the news each day. And obviously that could impact us in being aware and alert to any of those potential changes. We talked a bit about AI and education, and we talked a little bit about what our role should be in that overall AI work group discussion. But some good comments were brought up regarding education, the costs of some of these tools and how those costs are being covered, and carriers not necessarily being able to continue to provide those as value-added services. We did talk as well about the cost of regulations and how they affect those providers downstream. So as new regulations come out, those providers have to meet those regulations, and obviously there's sensitivity to price point. Sometimes they have to absorb those costs themselves. And then finally, we talked about what we can do to improve our overall BEAD process. We've had some comments in the task force here, and we've learned that some carriers are foregoing their approach to BEAD because it's heavy in red tape, it's government program. What can we do in 25 to do some process improvement to try to make some improvements to that to encourage more adoption?
Awesome. This time I'm just going to move on to the next group. Again, this isn't your very last opportunity with this information. So group 2. What's new with you guys?
Yeah, so we responded more to these focus areas that were already listed. And a lot of it came down to working with the counties more on educating them, helping with project planning, just so that they are more informed and better informed to make decisions on who to choose for funding or supporting and potentially subsidizing to fill those gaps that aren't going to be covered by BEAD. I think that was most of our newest discussion points.
Can blaze forward on group 3 quick, Jessica, if you want, because we're getting close on time.
All right, let's do this.
Yeah, I think group 3, we talked a lot more about like permitting issues and kind of, specific to Mike's example, a lot of permitting stuff requires a lot of really high level government involvement, but then also can be hyper local too. And so kind of leveraging that local experience in permitting and, working with those practitioners on the ground seemed like a pretty helpful thing. Also just kind of understanding across the board that permitting process and how it's different for BEAD, but also how it plays out on the regular and kind of, chipping away at that impossible thing of what does it look like to streamline permitting and where are the wins that you could find, and then kind of how does that play into the BEAD specific process was kind of a lot of our discussion. And then Brittany also brought up a nice idea to kind of look outside of Wisconsin for some best practices related to kind of some of the more end user experience type implementation of finding the best way to get folks the right equipment and the right tools to kind of maximize their user experience.
Thank you so much. How about group 4?
So group 4 touched on our last 2 focus areas and related to the first of the last 2 focus areas, which had to do with shifting the report's focuses from the public or towards the public rather than primarily on officials. we discussed learning more about what the public needs to access these reports, and this is important again for sustainability. And then for the last focus area, which had to do with enhanced representation, we talked about learning more about IDing organizations who represent low-income individuals and adoption challenges. And then we can specifically, who we can specifically or where we can specifically learn from is those individuals in those related groups and data that PSC has gathered in the past from community gatherings.
Thank you. And Sarah, my apologies to your group. It wasn't, I don't believe that comment was just about reports. I think it was about shifting in kind of an overall, maybe even communication focus. I don't know, but it wasn't just about reports, but reports I think are a big part of it. So yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Chris, I'm gonna just pop it back over to you because we are 1 minute away.
All right. Well, that was really good use of our time today. There were a lot of good discussions. So thank you everybody for your time today participating. A few things coming up. Our next meeting will be on March 19th at 1 p.m. And if you remember last month, I said we were planning to meet on site in person this month. We didn't. So we continue to work on that. So watch for that coming in the future as well. Otherwise, anything else from the PSC before we adjourn? Okay. We'll consider the meeting adjourned. Thank you all for your time today.
Bye.